Welcome to another explainer. Today, we're diving straight into something super fun. We are completely deconstructing the end-to-end process of crafting a captivating children's storytime animation. Our case study for this? It's an original 7 to 9 minute fantasy adventure specifically designed for 4 to 8-year-olds called Luna and the Magic Rainbow Crystal. We're going to look at exactly how pacing guidelines, narration techniques, and animation tutorials all come together to create, well, pure magic on screen.
So here is our creator's roadmap for today. First, pacing the narrative. Second, mastering story narration. Third, animating characters. And fourth, visualizing the magic. Let's get into it.
All right, starting off with Section 1, pacing the narrative.
Now, you can't just throw random ideas at a wall when you're writing for 4 to 8-year-olds, right? You actually need a solid mathematical foundation to keep them engaged. Just look at how this maps out the secret rule of pacing using a 1/4, 1/2, 1/4 ratio. It's like a giant puzzle. The beginning, where we build the enchanted forest and introduce the fading crystal, takes up exactly 1/4 of the story. Then the middle half is the real meat of the adventure. That's where Luna the fairy and her tiny dragon friend Spark seek out the 3 magic keys by doing things like helping a frightened baby unicorn and returning a fallen star. And finally, the resolve wraps it all up in the last quarter. It's a structurally satisfying formula that just works perfectly to hold a young viewer's attention.
But hey, before we even think about voice acting, don't forget the physical structure. You have to account for front and back matter, which basically translates to your title sequence and end credits in an animation. So why does this matter? Well, mastering this kind of pacing creates that irresistible what happens next anticipation. It is literally the secret sauce that takes your story from just average to an absolute winner.
Moving right along, let's hit Section 2, mastering story narration.
Okay, so a great script can be totally ruined by a bad delivery, right? That's where Planet Spark's framework comes in. It's a great reminder to never, ever overload a narrator. Whether you're directing a kid or a seasoned adult voice actor, you want to break the story down into 3 to 5 manageable segments. You ask trigger questions to ground them, like simply, who is the main character? And this is the most important part. Teach a single improvement technique at a time. Do not ask them for better pacing and wilder emotions and funny voices all in one single take.
Now this is absolutely crucial. Notice how a technique called 5-sense detailing instantly cures a boring monotone delivery. If your script just says, the crystal lost its glow, the actor's read is probably going to be pretty flat. But by throwing in sensory details, like whoosh, the glowing rainbow crystal suddenly became dull and cold, you're automatically forcing the narrator to describe sounds and feelings. It generates a wildly more dynamic performance.
And to take that delivery a step further, you want to implement character voice switching. You pitch your voice up for the tiny fairy Luna, and then slow way down into a rich, wise tone for Wizard Orion. When you combine that kind of emotional projection with purposefully timed pauses, like taking a deep breath right before a magic key is revealed, and rely on transition anchor words like suddenly, you will completely mesmerize your young audience. It pulls them right into that fantasy world.
Which brings us to Section 3, animating characters.
So, we have our paced script, we have our brilliant audio recording, now it's time to actually build it visually using tools like Animaker. You literally just start with a blank page. You search the library for the perfect backdrops, like pulling up a snow setting for the Mountain of Hope. Then, you use the character builder to perfectly match Luna's fairy wings and her outfit. Once the characters are built, you upload that amazing audio track we just talked about, utilize the built-in lip sync features, and use the timeline to manage exactly when your characters enter and exit. It operates a lot like presentation slides, actually.
Now, look closely at Animaker's Action Plus feature here. This is a total game changer for sequencing multiple actions in a single scene. Take Scene 6, in the Garden of Kindness. At 0 seconds, Spark the dragon spreads his wings. At 3 seconds, he flies across the sky. At 6 seconds, he drops rain clouds to save the wilting flowers. Instead of rendering 3 entirely separate scenes for all that, you just seamlessly chain these animations together on one timeline for a beautifully fluid sequence.
And finally, Section 4, visualizing the magic. To truly captivate our 4 to 8-year-old audience, we have to nail the central set piece of the whole story, the rainbow crystal. Following these 3 precise steps from DeviantArt artist Sleepy Bears, you first draw messy beams projecting outward from the crystal. Second, you lock the pixels and color those beams with rainbow stripes. Finally, and honestly, here is the real secret, you select each beam separately and apply a motion blur in the exact direction it projects. It creates this breathtaking, professional-level refraction effect that makes that final scene totally pop. Just make sure the blur distance is far enough to blend, but not so far that you lose the colors.
As we pull all of these technical elements together, Wizard Orion's words serve as a really beautiful reminder for us as creators. The greatest magic is not found in powerful spells, it's found in kindness, courage, and hope. All of the pacing math, the voice acting tricks, and the cool motion blur effects, they are ultimately just vehicles. They are tools to deliver a resonant thematic message and emotional connection to your audience.
So these frameworks are really just waiting for your unique imagination to put them into action. You know the math of pacing out a story, you know the psychology of a dynamic voiceover, the mechanics of timeline animation, and the secrets of rendering digital light. The entire structure is right there for you. But knowing how to build a world is only half the battle, right? The real question I want to leave you with is this. What message is important enough to you that you're willing to build an entire world just to share it? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I really can't wait to see the stories you bring to life.